Thank you for joining the January 2023 VMware TAM customer webinar. This webinar is organized by TAMs for TAM customers, and our goal is to provide you with an opportunity to learn about VMware products, hear great content, and interact with great speakers. Also, we want to make sure that you're getting the full benefit from your software. Please make use of the Q&A feature to ask any questions, and if your question doesn't get addressed today, be sure to reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. A few items before we get into the content. The next TAM customer webinar will be on February 16th. In this session, we'll dive into what's new in vSAN 8, including the Express storage architecture. Please join us to hear all about vSAN 8 and how it can help provide storage services at a lower cost and higher efficiency. As I mentioned earlier, we want you to benefit from these sessions by interacting with the speakers. So if you have any questions during today's webinar, use the Q&A feature and we'll address them during the webinar. At the end of today's session, you'll be prompted to fill out a simple survey related to the value you received from this session. And you'll also be asked to provide any topics you want to see in the future. Your completion of the survey is a very, very valuable gift back to us, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. After a few months, the recording will be publicly available on the VMware TAM Services YouTube channel. And that brings us to today's speaker and topic. Jad is the Technology Director in VMware's Cloud Management Business Unit, Office of the CTO. And in this role, Jad focuses on driving the business unit's product vision and strategy, the advancement of machine learning and emerging technologies, and leads the advanced development team within the Office of the CTO. He joins us today to go over VMware Aria Hub and Graph. Jad, thanks for presenting on this topic. I'll hand it over to you to get going.
All right, thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks everybody for joining. It looks like we have a pretty great audience and some old friends I saw. Nick, shout out to you, buddy. Yeah, I'm Jad El-Zein, and as Chris mentioned, Tech Director in the Office of CTO for Cloud Management. I've been at VMware for a little more than 13 years now. December was my 13-year anniversary. And as those years passed, some of the background I had includes automation. So I was helping drive our automation strategy and being a big advocate of our vRealize automation product, and wrote a lot about it, but I haven't updated my blog in years. But for the last several years, 3 or 4 years, I've been in the Office CTO, and one of the things that that we get to do, or we do, one of my roles has been to take emerging technologies and help turn those emerging technologies into a strategy and move our products forward, our technologies, our capabilities forward. A couple examples have been in the machine learning work we did with vRealize AI, Project Magna, and most importantly, what I'm going to talk about today, VMware Aria Graph and Hub are the technologies that our team built, and that went from strategy to validation and implementation to product, which was announced at VMware Explore last year. So I am honored to be here to talk about it. We've been getting a lot of questions and a lot of interest in what Aria and the broader ecosystem that is aligning under Aria is, and I will dig into that as much as I can today. I do like getting questions as we go along, so that the topic is fresh in our minds and not something that we're referring back to at the end. However, we will save some questions for the end, just general questions. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So just some setup here, right? And I won't spend too much time on setup, but we'll move forward. Now, what is all of this about? Why are we here? What are we doing? So there's this concept called multi-cloud. Everybody should be pretty familiar with multi-cloud, and it's self-explanatory. It's managing multiple clouds, or at least consuming multiple clouds. And a cloud is any big, huge blob of resources with some proprietary services and capabilities and some more generic and open source capabilities and services sitting on top of that. So your AWS's, GCP's, Azure's, Then, of course, your private clouds, your VMware-based environments, your data centers, whether you call them clouds or not, your enterprises, and then any VMware-hosted environment. So we cover basically private, public, hybrid, and altogether, this is multi. And the issue is it's been growing, it's been brewing over time. And initially, we saw this huge move to public cloud, and every organization we spoke to saying, it is in our strategy, it is a top initiative, it's taking top resources, we're moving to the public cloud. Fast forward several years, and we're seeing that initial push and all those ambitions not necessarily pan out. In some cases, as long as the investment backed it, or if it was a small organization that was born in public cloud, yes, fine, and it's worked, and cost management's a different issue. But in a lot of cases, the traditional enterprises found a lot of reason not to go all in public cloud. And in fact, we've seen a lot of customers come back and turn the lights back on in data centers and build more of a multi-cloud thing. And the reality is, an established enterprise, an established organization has way too much technical debt, legacy applications, dependency on existing apps and environments and third-party tools that are really built for an enterprise data center type environment. And then the other part of that is it wasn't as easy as lift and ship to the public cloud. To a VMware cloud, sure, for the VMware customers, but moving to a public cloud and taking advantage of what those services are truly there to offer requires a whole lot more to be done on the application side. Not to mention the new silos you're building, right? If I'm deploying and managing lifecycle of applications inside of a private cloud, and suddenly I have to do all the same thing into Azure and AWS and GCP and others, chances are the tools and services and pipelines and catalogs and all of that stuff are going to be unique to those providers. So I end up wanting to drive efficiency by getting out of the infrastructure business and consuming one or more public clouds. And what I'm ultimately doing is creating new teams to manage those environments, and then having communication and tool and skill set breakdowns that I didn't necessarily plan for. These are not one public cloud behaves like the other public cloud. Some of the core services, sure, the Kubernetes of the world and all that stuff. So we end up finding ourselves having to repeat processes because the platform is different. We have to take unique approaches to security, unique reporting requirements, because the way I pull metrics from Cloud A is very different than Cloud B, and how I compare that data is different. It's caused a lot of issues, and here I go spending too much time on this slide, but the final issue is the data. Now, the data is where all the richness lives, right? The data is key. It's the gold mine for being able to operate this thing. And so VMware's role in all of this has been traditionally build the best of breed product to do this thing really well. So for example, this is an industry problem, but it's only recently a problem. Before it was a benefit. So VMware has the vRealize stack of services and Cloud Health and Secure State and Tanzu Observability and all these solutions that have been built with a persona in mind, meaning you do this role and I'm going to build you the best of breed product to be able to operate in lifecycle and govern a cloud, VRA, for example. The best in breed product to be able to drive a NOC and be able to understand metrics and have visibility across your entire enterprise, VR ops, Tanzu observability, et cetera. I'm going to build you a best in breed product to give you cloud accounting and costing and all this stuff, Cloud Health, and then the cost components of ops. And that was great because that's what our customers were asking us to do, right? Because customer A, cloud admin, was very different than customer A, network admin. They needed unique tools to do their roles. But over time, what's happened is that those individual silos of personas and those specialty domains have largely broken down. And they've broken down because the way we're going to all benefit from consuming these cloud resources, public cloud and this whole multi-cloud, is to bring these folks together and build, a tiger team or a cloud center of excellence. And we see this almost across the board now. So your traditional storage admin and your traditional network admin, your traditional CISO and your traditional cloud architect, they're all at the same table. And they're all delivering the infrastructure and services and tools so that the app developers can do their job to build applications and services for the enterprise and move it forward. I mean, this should sound pretty familiar to everybody on here. Well, how do you do that with these tools and solutions that the entire ecosystem has built that are designed for domain-specific purposes? Well, what we don't want is to have what we call swivel chair management, where you've got a NOC with screens going across the board, and you've got individual tools, and you're managing every single aspect of your operation differently, right? Unfortunately, that's where the industry has taken much of this. Some solutions will stitch together the data so that you can have common dashboards and widgets. Well, we need to move beyond the dashboard and widget game, because while that might help consolidate views, it's not consolidating data. We've taken that approach ourselves, and we've realized that's not what our customers want. So then how about refactoring the entire application, the entire stack, and building one consolidated solution? Well, that's also not what our customers want, because there's still a lot of value in the individual capabilities of the domain specialty tools, right? I don't want all of Network Insight to live in vRealize operations. That's just not what I want. I don't want a bloated product that may be used by the common people. That's not what I want. I want to be able to drill into the domain specialist, but I still want this consolidated view and this consolidated and federated data approach. So that's what we came out to build. So several years ago, or a couple of years ago, we put out this strategy and said, listen, customers don't want us to build dashboards. Customers don't want us to stitch together a UI and have a UI that goes on forever and has unique data that is uncorrelated and unrelated, not to mention all the duplicative data I have to create to provide that those types of views, right? It's not solving the real problem. Not to mention the public cloud aspect of this. How do I extend solutions that were truly built for VMware environments and have them native, have native manageability into public clouds? So those were the challenges we had. We set out a strategy, we set out a plan, we validated, and this year, or at VMware Explore last year, we announced VMware Aria. So Aria is a multiple things, and just so we can clear up any confusion, Aria is not a rebranding, okay? Aria revolves around a product, or around a platform called Aria Graph and Aria Hub. And I'm going to drill into all of this in a second. The rest of the vRealize stack and the rest of the cloud management portfolio, in fact, has now aligned under the Aria umbrella, and therefore you're seeing vRealize automation become Aria automation. You're seeing Aria operation. So in that aspect, the branding came from the alignment to the platform. The big news isn't that they got renamed. The big news is the platform. So let's just get that out of the way. So as we move forward, I'm gonna try to speak a little bit quicker. As we move forward and understand that, I think everybody on this call should have some experience or some management, some need to use public cloud, whether it's your internal customers, your app developers, whether you're the app developer or you're the consumer. The public cloud is a very valuable resource for enterprises to adopt for many reasons. But what we're seeing is it's not one public cloud. And we're also seeing, like I mentioned earlier, it's not a complete evacuation from your private cloud environments anymore. There are good reasons to not be in the business of delivering the services that all of these cloud providers already do. And remember, public cloud isn't just about the EC2 instances or the virtual machine, the Azure virtual machines or the GCP machines. The public cloud is about the unique services that are available and modular and consumable through those cloud providers. That is what's drawing people in, right? Ultimately, you're going to have a deconstructed application that is consuming all of these services and some combination of actual virtual machines and other infrastructure that is managing the rest of the enterprise. The developers are application owners and the folks who are on the line to deliver apps for the line of business. They need the developer services. They need to be able to tap into native services, native technologies that allow their applications to be better, or allow them to develop quicker, allow them to get to market quicker, right? We don't need to be tooling all of that for every application uniquely if we don't have to. Huge draw to public cloud. Self-service consumption. Now, this is a catch-22. On one hand, it's instant gratification. I can spin up entire environments in the public cloud, get what I need done, deliver the goods, and make at least some people happy, the line of business per se, but not necessarily the cost and the folks who care about security and the CISOs. And there's a lot to consider there. That instant gratification of consuming public cloud also causes a significant amount of headache for the rest of the enterprise. How do we solve that? Right? So it's a benefit, but it's also a big problem. Scalability and cost and security also huge benefit, infinite scale, but also a potential problem. Like, what's out there? How do I manage it? How do I rein it in? Why is it costing so much? Who owns these resources? So on and so forth. Right? And not to mention that this exists in every unique cloud provider. So it's not just one service, it's all of your services. And then the biggest benefit is that the ability to just get in there, start consuming resources that are globally available, that allow you to deliver what you need, and then be able to expand for a global consumption and geographic consumption. So there's a lot of really good reason to go to public cloud, but this is not a public cloud pitch. You're probably already there, but those unique needs are also what's driving a lot of the problems. So rewind to a few minutes ago when I was saying a lot of customers are saying, yeah, we're all in on the public cloud, then started running into issues. Well, what applications go there? Who controls that? Are we taking our same traditional roles in this new public cloud universe, right? How do we manage security? If I have policies that CISO and InfoSec and everybody has been very strict in enforcing in my data center, what's so different in the public cloud? Why suddenly am I not, don't have that visibility? Why don't I have those controls? Why can't I choose the brand of product I want securing that thing? Well, because that's just the nature of the beast. Well, at the very least, how do I apply my needs and ensure that my policies and my boundaries and my guardrails and my access or AAA and all that stuff applies regardless of which cloud? These are the real problems that are causing this initially a headache, but also reassessing of what moves to cloud, how do I do it, and so on. All right. The biggest one was that first one. Actually, the first, all four of these are the biggest ones. But the one that seems to be the initial upfront challenge is, what do I move to the public cloud and why am I doing it? Is there a cost benefit? Is it more secure? Or am I actually adding risk? Is it going to be more expensive? And if so, why am I doing this? What's the data that's backing this decision? And it's that data that's been lacking that has not necessarily helped our customers get to where they need to be in this ultimate multi-cloud world. Okay. Now, if you think of those silos that are breaking down, those individual skill sets, those individual tools, they're all over the place. How does that apply across multi-cloud, but also across the tools that we're comfortable using? If I'm doing lifecycle management, I need to do that consistently across all clouds, if I'm doing security and policy management, and if InfoSec is my number one priority, I need to do that consistently across all clouds, right? Infra as code, just basic catalog services, basic pipelining, observability and app monitoring, understanding the relationships between my apps. It needs to be consistent across all clouds if this is the strategy that the business is heading in or wants to implement, and so on, right? We don't have to go through it. And this is just a fraction of what we're talking about. So to get to where we wanted to be in Aria, we had to reassess how our portfolio delivers these capabilities. And for those of you who are vRealize customers, you've probably felt this. It's probably not news to you that the vRealize products really are designed to do the one thing really well, best in breed. But there's a whole lot of value in where those solutions are right now and what we can do with them to do alignment like this. So if we start looking at those needs and those requirements, we can pretty much organize them under these three pillars. So all things cost, all things operations, and all things automation. Again, if you're familiar with vRealize, you know that there's several products that fit into these columns. But what's missing is this underlying piece, this common platform and data store, which is an entire architecture in itself. So while we provide a lot of integration between the individual products, once we start breaking them down into these columns or domains, the integration needs become unique, become significantly more challenging, but also become absolutely required, right? Sharing data and consolidating data and being able to correlate and consume and federate that data is no longer an option. We cannot continue to function and deliver solutions that just live in silos. Our customers don't want that. We don't want that, right? That experience can no longer be the optimal experience that we set out to do. So this is how we've aligned Aria. And breaking down those three columns, on the left, you see Aria Cost, Aria Cost powered by Cloud Health specifically, Aria Operations in the center, and then Aria Automation in the right. And there are several products and services that are aligned under each of those. But moving forward, we just care about Aria Operations, Aria Automation, Aria Cost. And so this was the first step in aligning the portfolio underneath or with the platform. And that common data tier, that federated data tier is right here in the middle. That's Aria Hub, say powered by Aria Graph. So Hub and Graph are our SaaS-based services, SaaS-only based services. We'll go ahead and get that one out of the way. And that is the new thing. That is the new technology, new service, and it's in fact a significant architecture. But it's what every customer gets by being a cloud service, a cloud management SaaS consumer, SaaS customer. So if you have VRCU, you automatically get Aria Hub and Aria Graph. This is not something that is being sold or anything like that. It is the SaaS platform for all things cloud management. And that's on purpose, because we wanted to build a solution that is how customers interact and consume the cloud, independent of which individual products you actually have. So let's just say you are VRCU standard and you are VRCU enterprise. When you log into the SaaS service, you land in Aria Hub, right? So Aria Graph is the architecture. That's the federated data platform. Aria Hub is the federated consumption layer. Fancy word for the UI that everything plugs into. And so all customers who are logging into cloud management SaaS get these technologies. Now, what you've implemented and what you've licensed for determines what this experience is. So I'm not going to pull public cloud metrics if I'm not subscribed to public cloud services, and that's probably a different conversation. I want to keep this on the technical side, but it's designed to federate the services that are available. So basically, what's in it for VMware? Well, what's in it is customers will find value in having those additional services available to them, because I can incorporate things like, if I go to enterprise with Verni, I'm gaining flow-based application discovery and net flow visibility and so on. If I have ops and VRA but don't have, or if I have ops and don't have VRA, for example, well, I can still do a lot. I can have these visualizations, but maybe I'm not getting the full experience in lifecycle management and vice versa. So it's really designed to say, what does this customer subscribe to? That is the experience that is going to be presented. And this is an example of an application model inside this is an actual screenshot inside of Aria Hub that you can start visualizing what the environment looks like, right? And it's using the tools that are available, plus everything Aria Hub and Graph bring to the table to help you get these visualizations. I'm going to drill into this a lot more. Now, the other thing that Aria Graph does is it actually consumes the public cloud services directly. So where you don't have, or where vRealize may have been a little too focused on private cloud, Aria Hub and Graph compensate for that by pulling and subscribing directly to the public cloud. So on one hand, I say you're going to benefit from the capabilities of the net capabilities of the vRealize stack or the Aria stack. But where those fell short in public cloud, admittedly, Aria Hub and Graph make up for it by pulling and filling those gaps directly from the public cloud, from the provider. And also, third-party tools. We're building an entire ecosystem around this. So how do we plug into Tanzu applications? How do we plug into unique services across public cloud and so on? So application discovery, application or the inventory collection, security and compliance threats, all of that, we can garner or pull all of that in by directly connecting to the public cloud endpoint or the data source and consuming all of that independent of vRealize. Now that my data is federated, I can let the rest of the stack know that, hey, this thing exists. You, VROps or VRA, don't have the native capability built into your product to have done this on your own, but now you know. So Aria Graph is designed to very rapidly move the entire stack forward into the world of public cloud. Right? And in fact, at VMware Explore, we announced a free tier, which every single person on this call can go and sign up for, that allows you to onboard 2 public cloud resources and test drive Aria Hub and Graph. Right? I'll remind at the end of the call, but this is something that that has also gotten a ton of attention and a ton of signups. If you just want to see what this is about without necessarily plugging in your private cloud environment and just exploring what is available in the free tier, check that out. It's there's a lot of good to be had there. So anyway, there's a keyword here that I'll use a lot throughout this presentation, right? And it's federation. Federation is the difference between bringing the data together, right? Running those through ML pipelines, running those through data transformation, and then being able to visualize and consume that data in one single manner, one way. This is not a stitched together dashboard. All of the data you see in this example is coming from one single data store. That data initially existed, the source of truth, in multiple places, but we're essentially taking everything we need to be able to visualize what you're seeing here from all the products that do that thing best, right? We have network flow data, we have Kubernetes cluster visibility, we have observability data, we have metrics and operations and cost. All of those are unique tools, plus everything that the cloud provider is giving us. And we're collecting that centrally and visualizing it in a way that is consistent, regardless of the cloud provider, regardless of the source. And we're essentially filling in a lot of gaps by being able to bring all of these things together. And the only way we can do this is by federating the data. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Okay, so if we look at, oops, let me jump into the platform, and I want to talk about some of the unique services that allow us to get where we need to be. So if we look at the platform, Realize Graph is the center of all of this. It is the architecture. Not Realize Graph, sorry, Aria Graph. Aria Graph is the federated data store. And an Aria Graph does a bunch of things. First of all, it is the feed, and it pulls and subscribes to the entire rest of the Aria stack. So that all the unique capabilities of those individual domain specialist tools now become federated inside of the graph. And it's a graph database, hence graph. Right? What do we use a graph database for? Its number one value is its ability to build relationships across entities. So now I've got all of this data, rich data, years of data, collected from all of these different tools, plus the public cloud providers themselves. And I'm able to correlate that and build the relationships, because VRA did a collection from, let's just say, AWS. VROps and Aria Operations did a collection from AWS, from that same account. Network Insight, same account, right? You see where this is going. Log Insight, et cetera. Same account. So now I've got all of these products that have unique visibility, their unique visibility and their unique way of collecting and managing that data. And by the way, all of these products call that same managed entity something different. They're all managing, and this is not just a VMware problem, by the way, right? They're all managing the data, the entities that are collected from these environments and the applications and the associated services in their own unique way, which means they have a unique UID, unique way to store it, unique names of the entity itself. These products, while we integrated a lot of capabilities over the years and in the suite, these products are not federated or have not been federated up until this point. So I'm bringing all of this data in, I'm storing every entity multiple times, I'm calling it something unique, I have a unique path to it, a unique path to manage it, unique APIs, and ultimately I can stitch together a dashboard and I can say, well, when VRA needs to provision to this cloud, call VROps and ask VROps, where I should drop it in advanced placement. Great, that's a great capability. Right? VROps says, tell me who you're asking for, tell me, or who's making the request, the services that are available to them. VROps responds, says, that person has access to these clusters or these regions and zones. Go this one because of some capacity policy. Great. But those are multiple round-trip RESTful API calls. And at the end of the day, it's not deep integration, it's API communication. Again, not a unique VMware thing. There's a big difference between federated integration and communication. But these capabilities have been very powerful, very strong, but it's not where we need to be. So once we provision, we get our applications, they're stood up. I can go in there and lifecycle it, and I can see cost. And when I click on those cost tabs, I'm making a call, an API call to Realize Operations or other cloud or cost providers and say, how much does this entity cost? Well, you call this entity something different. So I'm communicating and bringing that thing in. It's not federated data. That is how we got here. This is why this is so different than anything we've ever done, is because instead of all of that noise, which is still available in the individual products, nothing is being retired per se, right? All of that data, all of the best capabilities of all of these solutions are now federated in the graph. So when my user comes in through either the hub or programmatically through an API, they are hitting a single data store, making a single request, and pulling all of that data directly because it's all available centrally. It's a unified data store in the graph. So for every customer out there who said, man, I wish VRA had better network visibility. I wish VROps can do lifecycle. I wish Network Insight was able to show me, cost or the lifecycle ownership or who provisioned this thing. Well, once all of these pieces are together, we could absolutely do that. And that's precisely what we're doing. So think of deconstructing all of these best of breed products and bringing all the unique services together. So I'm essentially consuming a service that has it all, but only if I'm allowed to see that data, right? We still honor governance and access controls and project groups and all this other stuff. We're bringing these artifacts from every product. So the projects that VRA introduces are now available across the board. Cost that Cloud Health and vRealized Operations or Aria Operations introduce are now available across the board because it's all centrally controlled. And when we do this, one of the most important design principles, in my opinion, was that we can federate all day long, but if we can't consume it completely, then we are letting our customers down. So with a federated data store, we needed federated consumption. And GraphQL, the GraphQL API, is our choice for very scalable, very performant graph-based consumption because of many things I'm going to explain. So the entire graph is consumable through the public API, every single aspect. If you can do it in Hub, you can do it programmatically. And anyone who's ever complained about the lack of RESTful API schema and so on, or even if we've largely caught up and made a lot of a lot of the APIs available, it's inconsistent across each product. How do we solve that? Well, we federate everything. We correlate it. We name everything the same, right? And now I can manage it and control it consistently. And I never have to, from that point on, hit the individual endpoint for unique data. It's all available in the graph. And that was a very important part of it. So the API, the UI, Aria Hub, consumes the same GraphQL API as a user in a console would, or browsing the embedded GraphQL schema. This was very important, and I hope everyone could appreciate the importance of that. Now, what does this mean for our third-party ecosystem? Well, our first phase, our first goal was to get all of this federation working with the VMware stack, and that extends into our Tanzu portfolio and others, right? So a lot of that's coming to fruition now. Now, the next piece of this is, what does it mean for the ecosystem? Well, let's take a look at external CMDBs or ServiceNow or any your automation tools, your config management tools. They are immediately able to consume this federated graph, the federated data. They are immediately able to consume the GraphQL API, the public API, which publishes everything, assuming access permissions, and can very rapidly start benefiting from access to that data. So anybody who's built any pipeline or any workflow or any custom dashboard in ServiceNow or any CI/CD or execution pipeline that hits up several different products on their unique APIs using a unique UID for whatever entity I'm going after and churning all of that and bringing it all together, this solves that problem. This is directly hitting that out of the park. right? So now ServiceNow, your CI/CD, all your external tools, the entire ecosystem, we're building an entire integration engineering team for this, can hit just the graph, single API to do whatever we want. Let's just take a deeper look into a pain point. And I tend to focus a lot on this because the problem is real, right? Let's just say I tag one of you guys or gals to go out and find me all of this data. I have a private cloud and a couple public clouds, all used for dev and prod, and I've got applications everywhere. So I'm going to say, hey, Nick, right? Go out and get me information about this application. And it's my finance app v1.2, whatever. Okay, well, what is that application made up of? Right? What are the relationships? What are the tiers? What are the individual entities and services that make up that application? Well, that's challenge number one. We need to discover and be able to determine that. If I have a point in time model of that, sure, I could leverage that. But let's just say I need to figure out the application. Who's the source of truth? Who owns that application? Is it VRA because it was the deployment? Is it natively in EC2 or leveraging native AWS services or Azure or GCP, whatever? Find that. Well, challenge number one. Number two, who provisioned it? Who provisioned all the pieces, right? What are the relationships between all the individual pieces? What is their life cycle state? What does the topology look like? Now give me individual metrics. Give me CPU, storage, memory metrics, and whatever else that I need to know. Not just from the infrastructure, but also from the application. I need deep network visibility because InfoSec is really concerned about the flow data and wants to make sure that my microsegments are accurate and all that good stuff are doing their job. Observability data for the application tooling and being able to look at things like tracing and application level metrics and KPIs. What about security? Everything from who has access to where it's published to whether it's a private or public IP. Who can control the lifecycle of this thing, who can get into the application, who could modify the infrastructure, all of those things. What does it all cost holistically? All right. And then what policies are enforced to make sure that this meets the requirements of the business? Now try to do this with whatever cloud management stack that's available to you today. I'll pick on vRealize. That is a lot of data and a lot of unique queries that we have to make to the entire ecosystem, because there is no one solution that will give you all of this unless the data has already been federated. There's no one public cloud that will give you all of this unless you have subscribed to everything and then some. And there is no one platform that will give you all of this. And so all of this data has to take into account, all of these queries have to take into account the unique identifier of the object I'm trying to pull data for. Again, if you've built workflows in VRO or others, you know the issue here. So VRA can have a deployment. So fine, I'll pull that deployment in. Now I have individual VMs as part of that deployment. Those individual VMs are unique to VRA. VROps calls those things something different. Azure will call those same entities something different if that's where the source is. Log Insight, Network Insight, there are unique IDs. So I have to hit all of these different URLs, and I have to have the unique identifier and be able to do all of this. So we're building a pretty significant workflow and a lot of back and forth RESTful API calls, not to mention having to know all of this data up front and being able to access it to be able to get anywhere close to this. And this is just not an extreme example, by the way. This is a regular, everyday example. So how does the Aria Graph and Aria GraphQL API solve this problem? Now remember, keyword is federation. Instead of having to go to all the source of truth and be able to bring all this together, I now have a single throat to choke. My developer or my consumer, my admin, whoever it might be, queries the graph using GraphQL API. It's the public API. I've got a token, I query, And it's a single query. And that query has a request that says, I need information about these entities, and this is what I need, right? Well, I no longer have to get all of that individual data from the individual sources, even third party, when the third party integration comes in. GraphQL knows that to get that request, I've got a whole bunch of different places to go. Now, first of all, we've federated the vast majority of the data. So immediately I have, next hop access to the majority of what you're requesting, all inventory data, all derived stats, all history, anything I've stored, it doesn't change often, is immediately available. The relationships, the topology, which will change and will be updated. All of that is stored in the graph, what we call the entity data store, EDS. That is the graph database. Now, I've also asked for a lot of metrics. So we have a stats service that knows who owns all of those metrics, right? I'm not going to store CPU data if I'm looking for real-time metrics because it's already expired by the time I've queried it. I need that live. So our stats service will go out and pull the source of truth of that object, which the user has to not know anything about, and pull that metric. So I'm going to Verni, I'm going to Ops, I'm going to directly to the source, AWS and Azure and GCP. And I'm also doing a lot of computing, and these are called derived stats. So I can do unique transformation of that data to give you something unique, like a score or a risk or something like that that is unique to Aria. And I'm now bringing all of that together through the GraphQL stitching service. And all of this is instantaneous and done with a single query, so that I make my query one URL for the provider, so the GraphQL API, one response, and it covers the entire scope of that example. And my response is, this is a typical response for GraphQL. This is not the example, actually. This is just a snippet that I wanted to show, because one of the things I like to talk about here is that, here's the name of an entity, right? And here is the UID that Aria Graph manages that entity by. I no longer, so this is a universal identifier. So for every single managed entity that lives in Graph, which is, by the way, scalable to 1 billion managed objects, I have a unique identifier, so that all the uniqueness that occurs from all the third party and all of the vRealize, the rest of the stack, could all fall under this one unique identifier. So from this point forward, no matter where that data is coming from, I'm just managing using this UID. And one of the things I could actually call for in my query, which is what this example is, hey, in your response, tell me what the individual responder, the data provider, calls this entity. And this is something that we can just print, right? And so this is, here's my identifier. Here's what the provider calls it. This is the virtual center, for example, or vCenter. VRA, by the way, calls it this, and it's a resource in VRA. Verni calls it this, and it's a virtual machine in Verni. VROps calls it this, and it's also a virtual machine in VROps. So we are able to now consolidate all of the uniqueness of the individual products under Graph. Moving forward, anytime I need any information from anywhere in the environment, I have a single API, and more importantly, a single UID to identify that product. This really just is more important for those who do programmatic consumption of the cloud. So I hope it's coming off as such. Okay. So I don't see any questions yet. So I'm gonna talk about now the net benefit. Hopefully there's been a ton of that, but let's talk about what it actually means for cloud services, for VMware cloud services, cloud management, once you've done all of this hard work of federating and unifying the data. So again, we've got Hub and Graph at the bottom. With the data being federated, again, Hub and Graph are the platform, that are the new capabilities that everybody gets, as long as you're a SaaS cloud management consumer. It really opens up a whole lot of opportunity for innovation. And a lot of this was announced at VMware Explore. So with all of that data federated, we are able to build net new services and value-added services, such as VMware Aria Guardrails. And I'll break these down a little bit more. VMware Aria Migration, VMware Aria Business Insights. Again, tools that are leveraging the federated data set, which I was not able to do before, because I did not have a single throat to choke. I did not have a single view or a single path to both consumption and invocation. So I needed to solve the biggest problem first, and like the whole world opens up for us, and the ability to provide new services that are hugely effective for our customers, in our opinion, right? And these align very nicely with the problems of public cloud we put out earlier. So for VMware Aria Guardrails, think about all the disparate data points, all the unique policies, all the unique security and compliance requirements, all the uniqueness of the cloud provider itself, whether that's VMware, hosted VMware, or any of the public cloud providers, right? They all have unique cost policies and performance needs and configurations, all this stuff. But you as the enterprise have one need, and that is it needs to cost XYZ, and I need to have visibility and control over it. It has to be configured within company compliance. It has to be secure. It has to have access controls. It has to be manageable. And my expectations and performance are whatever they might be. To do this universally without federating the data first is a hell of a challenge. So what we want to be able to do is leverage that federated data set and then be able to apply these services across the board, because now it's all consolidated. And with Guardrails, not only am I setting these policies, first of all, Guardrails provides 300 plus policies out of the box, and you can go and say, user A has this cost limit and this infrastructure resource limit, go enforce that. Or any AMI that's consumed has to match this AMI that is corporate blessed, and it can only be provisioned in these regions, right? And it has to have this IAM rule for security purposes. Now for Greenfield, so for new provisions, we could execute and we can follow all of those things, no problem. Now, and for Brownfield, this is where things get interesting. Brownfield is existing environments. With the implementation of Guardrails on those existing environments, I can now true it all in, bring it in together. And I can say, you have to use this AWS or EC2 template. Well, if there's machines out there that have been provisioned, instances that have been provisioned using something else, well, I can now report on that. That is considered a drift. If there is a cost drift, if there's a security drift, an IAM policy, a rule drift, if security groups don't match, and if the services I'm consuming don't match the user or the policy or the project or the app, whatever, I could report on that. And one step further, I could then enforce it automatically. So this is drift control using a technology called IDEM, IDEM, which is an open source capability that is essentially part of the SALT portfolio, but it is, we've open sourced it. It is out there to try if you'd like. But IDEM is also a core component of Guardrails. And when a policy is out of compliance, IDEM will go and bring it into compliance. So if I'm provisioning outside the scope of my management tools, which has always been a problem, user comes in and says, VMware said to have all of this together and have full visibility and lifecycle, I need to go in through this catalog and provision through VRA. But VRA doesn't have all the integrations I need for my point, so I'm just going to go straight to AWS or straight to Azure. Okay, well, that happens, right? And there's no claim here that our cloud management tools have always been able to do the entire scope of everything. And that's just the reality of things. So that user goes up, pulls out his laptop, connects to his or her portal, and starts provisioning templates and applications and services. Well, if it wasn't initially managed through your cloud management tools, well, there's no visibility into that until maybe it gets collected, and then I have to somehow turn that into a relationship with a project and an org and all this other stuff, right? That's any tool. But with guardrails, as long as guardrails is configured and Aria Hub and Graph are configured for that endpoint, I will see those objects, and I will take these policies and my guardrails policies into consideration when those objects are out there. So not only do I know that something circumvented my management tools, we're also, implementing the reality that not all of your developers want to use all of your management tools. The reality is that's just not going to happen. So how do I, who's responsible for this, whether I'm InfoSec or cloud management, whatever my role is in the enterprise, how do I make sure that whatever gets provisioned is in compliance, under control, reported, and fully visible? Well, that's what we do here. So a machine gets provisioned into Azure or GCP, or an instance pushed out, or a new service consumed. I don't have any cost visibility, cost controls, performance, anything. No security policy, no reporting, until it's one day collected and I could do investigation. Instead, what's happening is Aria Graph is subscribed to the event bus of that provider. So as soon as that request comes in, Aria Graph is in the picture, whether that user knew it or not. That's huge and a significant gap up until now. So Graph immediately picks up that event, can make sure it's in compliance, and either let it go and report or force compliance and prevent the provisioning, or some combination, right? The action is up to the admin. And then more importantly is I can then tell my management stack that, hey, that thing exists. I knew about it in real time. And now all of my products, all of my tools and my compliance requirements, all of that stuff is instantly remediated. An item is back there making sure that the policy is implemented if I have a hard implementation requirement or a hard compliance requirement. So this is pretty significant. I hope you could see that in my voice, but it's something that's been seriously lacking, right? Circumventing the tools that are designed to keep the environment safe and compliant and secure and productive have constantly been circumvented. And so when we bring guardrails into the environment and are able to subscribe to all of these endpoints, that no longer happens. So this is it's pretty significant. And then at that point, just on the policies real quick, we could rubber stamp these policies across public clouds. This was problem number one: these disparate tools, disparate security requirements, and these unique ways of managing anything across these products. There is no consistent way to do that. Well, with guardrails, it becomes consistent. Everything is done in JSON or a policy up front or in the UI or programmatically, right? And it's executed consistently across the board. That translation between what you want and how it's implemented is done under the in the back end, right? So that's our goal with guardrails, and guardrails. Initial guardrails has GA'd, and we're continuing to build out the broader capability across public clouds. Okay. The next piece here is, well, what do I do about migration? So migration has existed for a while. So the other problem was, migrating to public cloud chances are we left things behind, or we didn't plan with the full picture in mind. We need to be able to understand every aspect of an application, all the dependencies, all the network flows, all the topology considerations, and even things like cost and security and metrics before I just lift and ship. And is it even compatible? Am I thinking of everything? So our migration capabilities between VMware Cloud and VMware Cloud have existed for a while. But what we're bringing to the picture here is the federated source that does not exist in our current migration capabilities. So if you're a VMC customer, for example, there's a lot of really good technologies that allow me to essentially do a live migration from cloud to cloud, VMware Cloud to VMware Cloud. We want to do a couple of things here. We want to provide a much deeper, much broader picture of the decisions you're making. We want to make sure that the source and destination are going to be consistent. We want to make sure that the application doesn't break. If I have an idea in my mind that this is going to be a whole lot cheaper, well, I want to be able to predict that for you. If I have an idea that I'm going to be able to drive performance or scalability, well, we want to be able to determine all of that for you. So we'll actually do test runs and be able to emulate the migration and assess whether or not what your goals are seated in reality, right? Because I federated that data, and because now I'm taking the best of all the capabilities and essentially have them at my fingertips, when I run through the migration, the VMware Aria migration, I'm actually drawing a whole lot more from the environment to make a much more, a much more educated guess or prediction on what the outcome of that migration would be and whether or not you should even do it. And that's the other part of that, right? So the next part of this is, how do we migrate from Cloud A to Cloud B? VMware to AWS, AWS to Azure, those types of things. So from VMware platform to VMware platform, easy peasy. But from platform to platform, different platforms, that's a whole other ballgame. And so we've already kicked off the effort to work on that. Now, there's some things we can do and some things we can't do. A lot of migration from VMs to native cloud services, that's a rewrite in a lot of cases. But let's take a look at what we can do and whether we can do an OS level or a service level migration to help accelerate those things, and then eventually be able to build out a solution that currently is just not even possible. All right, now lastly, on the what's possible, we introduced at VMware Explore VMware Aria Business Insights. Now, in the same way I'm federating metrics and data across all of these environments and being able to give you consolidated and consistent views, we also have this whole other thing of events and logs and alerts. Now, all of these tools, as well as your third-party tools, are all generating events and logs and observations from your entire environment, right? And product A and product B aren't always on the same page, or usually are not on the same page. So when I have an outage, for example, my entire stack is lighting up with the same information, but uniquely. That's a problem. Now, if I was a domain specialist working in a domain bubble and all I cared about was deep network visibility, Verni is my go-to tool. Absolutely, Network Insight, right? And it'll have unique alerts, unique events, and I can quickly go in there and track down the problem, look at my traces, my net flows, and be able to drill in and solve the problem. But my operations folks also saw that alert. My VRA folks, my Log Insight folks, my third-party tools folks all saw that alert. Even the provider saw the problem, and this is an issue. So what do I use to root cause? How do I go and start troubleshooting this? Which tool in my toolbox or tool chest can very rapidly get this problem remediated, whatever it might be? And so as we federate data, we also federate events and alerts. So all of these sources are coming in, something happens, well, things are going to get lit up, right? But it's all being fed into the graph. And Insights has an ingest engine that says, oh, all of these things are the same, because I know that what the source of this is some UID that is unique to that provider is actually now a universal ID. So I can correlate that all of these things are the same VM or app or object or infrastructure or host or whatever it might be, right? And I'm also correlating what each and every single one of those tools is telling me about that alert and potential resolution. So now if Network Insight has an alert and a resolution, and Operations has an alert and a resolution, and the native provider has an alert and a resolution, well, I can bring all of that together and very rapidly get you to the source, the root cause, and a resolution, and then even an easy button to solve it. Now that's hugely powerful, and it's totally independent of the cloud provider. So whether or not it's an application that's stretched across hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, or an instance living in AWS or a VM living in Azure or in VMware, it doesn't really matter. An event is an observation, and observations should be considered and correlated so that I can get to root cause rather quickly. That's what we're doing with Business Insights. Okay. All right, so I did talk about the technology already. So at this point, one of the closing pieces here is about what all this means to our customers, right? You guys are all TAM customers. You have a lot of visibility into VMware. There's a lot of resources available to you. One of the things I mentioned earlier on was the free public cloud tier. Go try it, right? If you are a VRCU customer in SaaS, well, you're going to start seeing Aria Graph and Hub. If you want to get in early, reach out to your account team or your TAM, all right? But at the very least, right now, you can go and sign up for the free tier, onboard a couple of public cloud endpoints, and just start playing with it. There's a lot of things that you can do immediately as you start thinking about how to leverage VMware Aria as a whole, but the core tech here, which is Aria Graph and Aria Hub. Okay, so I do appreciate everyone's time and sticking around. I do think we have plenty of time for Q&A. Maybe I might be wrong, but I'm going to answer a couple of these out loud. So from Zoltan, are there any plans to integrate Skyline as well? Absolutely. Skyline has a lot of unique capabilities for VMware specific environments, your inventory, your compliance and patching requirements, and all that, everything else that the Skyline Advisor provides. That is absolutely being incorporated into the graph, which means we can do a lot of correlation of those environments as well. So yes, Skyline will provide unique capabilities. And in fact, in my big drawing there, Skyline was one of the sources. Are there any plans to integrate Orchestrator? Not the one in VRA natively. So here's the thing about Orchestrator. There are plans to get to build out the GraphQL capability of Orchestrator, so it can be a consumer of GraphQL and public API, which means we can see workflows that are, dozens and dozens and dozens of executables large, workflow large, nodes large, significantly be reduced because all of the data is in a single place. And so from that aspect, we want VRO to be a consumer of GraphQL natively, and we want to be able to support that. But other than that, there's not a whole lot more that needs to happen for VRO to become a part of this. vRealize Orchestrator doesn't need to do anything else for Aria Graph to function for Aria Graph other than to be able to consume the API, right? And then maybe subscribe to the event bus. So we do provide public subscription to our event bus, starting with VMware tools and then growing that out as part of our integration effort. So VRO, for example, can query the API, will eventually be able to subscribe to the bus, and then eventually, as the integration ecosystem is built out, be able to write into the graph directly. Now, that can be done by direct integration, but it can also be done right away by writing to any one of the objects, which then get collected by the graph regardless. So that's a long answer. There is no need to individually integrate Orchestrator. We're just working on the plugins so that it could read and write into the API. Thanks, Zoltan. Okay, so I'm here to take any other questions. I hope this was useful. Please do, reach out to your TAMs and inquire. I'm always happy to have a conversation, outside of these events. And, I hope, I hope everybody can give the solution a shot and provide feedback. That would be great as well. And then if there's anybody who wants to get onboarded sooner rather than later, or wants to join, the broader beta, also, all of these things are something that we can facilitate for the customers. And then any just general feedback, do bring it to your TAMs. I would love to hear feedback about this event. Hey, Chris, what are we on time? Yep. I lost track on time. I think we're right there.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, we allow up to 60 to 90 minutes. So if we had more questions right now, we could definitely take them, but I don't see them coming in. With that, this was a really good session. As we were kind of moderating and chatting outside of the session, someone mentioned that this was probably one of the best explanations of Aria Hub and Graph that they've heard, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, the foundation that you laid, I think, was really important. So it was really good stuff for sure.
Great, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Right,
yeah, really appreciate you being on here.
I was able to talk about it.
What was that? Sorry.
Our team built it, so I'm glad I was able to articulate that. All right, so I noticed Ansible is shown as an integrated product. In what way would Ansible be used in relation to Aria? Just to be totally transparent, that's just a logo on that slide right now as an example, because Ansible is, shows up in all of our customer environments. At the very least, consuming the public API and being able to have full access to that federated data source. And then part two would be for Ansible to actually mutate data. Mutate in GraphQL terms is like a post. It's an actual action, right? So at the very least, for their ecosystem, the broader ecosystem, things that will be immediately available are things like query and mutate, right? Which means we've done all the federation work, and these tools instantly are able to write to it. The second part of the integration story, which I didn't get too deep into, is that my team actually is, we've built out an integration engineering team, and we're building all the framework and foundation to allow external data to actually live inside the graph. And this is something that our customers are just asking for, right? They are, every conversation we had at Explore and every VBC we're in, they're saying, okay, I built this widget, or I have this solution, or I use third-party APM, or something like that. And I want to be able to query and correlate the data that's available in that thing with everything else that Aria Graph gets me. Well, we absolutely have intentions to make that capability possible. So other than bidirectional API, query mutate, and bidirectional data flows, I want to then write my data as a record, as adding new entities, as a subscription, whatever it might be, into the graph to make it as federated as the rest of the native stack. And so there's a lot of interest there from integrators, especially, and partners and customers who want to be able to do that. So that's where that whole ecosystem comes into play. I mean, the possibilities there are endless. Right? Thanks, Mark. Are there
Looks like we
plans to have
one
an
more.
on-prem version? Okay, so this is a this is a tough one, right? So what I showed in the technology slides is a platform that is scalable to 1 billion managed entities per org, right? That is designed to scale and grow in this seamlessly, or seemingly infinite way that public clouds do. And it is a SaaS solution for that reason, right? We also, as VMware, leverage a lot of native public cloud services to build the architecture, which is a significant architecture to make all of this possible. The event buses and the ingest engines and the inventory and entity data stores and all of these things are vast. And at this point, that experience in a private cloud scenario, an on-prem appliance or whatever, is just not something we can quickly do. Okay, so it is a SaaS-only solution. And just to double down on that, not only is Aria Graph and Hub SaaS only because of the requirements of the architecture and all that, but the rest of the solutions that are federated, your cloud management stack, your VMware cloud management stack, is also required to be the SaaS versions of those things. And that is, we can get into a technical rationale of why that's the case, but that is the case. Now, we are working on getting these into sovereign clouds, getting these into FedRAMP clouds, and we're already well on our way to build all that. So if you're in the I need this to be compliant, but SaaS is okay camp, we've got solutions for you. If this is SaaS is not okay, I don't use SaaS anywhere, I would question your public cloud consumption. But if I don't use SaaS anywhere, then we don't necessarily have an answer today. The vRealize stack for on-prem is still available and will continue to be available for the foreseeable future.
Really good questions.
Yes.
Thanks for taking the time to answer those, Jad. Again, this was really good content. I think unless something else trickles in, maybe we could just wrap up. Again, this was really awesome. We mentioned this at the beginning, but again, this presentation was recorded. Your TAM can make it available to you. As far as feedback goes, Jad, I heard you mention that we do have a survey at the end of this, so definitely feel free to provide feedback to us. And be sure to join us next month, where we'll be looking at vSAN 8. And we look forward to seeing everyone then. That's on February the 16th. So with that, thanks everyone for joining.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. See you next time.